Well, the world is moving forward at a fast speed, and climate conditions are changing. And the scenario where agriculture will take place in the future is going to be different from what we experienced this last century. We are clearly moving forward to a more extreme and stable climate. We are experiencing events more intense than ever before. Agriculture is an extremely sensitive activity for all matters related to climate. We need to make an analysis aimed to determine what we need to adapt in order to keep producing with these new climate conditions. Today it's vital for agriculture to start from now on implementing new initiatives aimed to prevent this new scenario will negatively impact agriculture. Needless to say about maximum temperatures in Santiago, for instance, as a representation of what is going on all along Chile, we can see that temperatures have been increasing fast. Since 2015, temperature is becoming higher year after year, so it is expected that by the second half of this century, temperature will be 1.5 to 2 degrees higher on average in most national territory. Along with this rise in temperature, other phenomena of concern may occur, such as heat waves, which will occur more frequently with higher persistence and longer duration. Usually in the past, heat waves lasted only 1 or 2 days. Today, it is not less than 3 days, where temperatures are above 30, 32, 33 degrees, and sometimes even reaching 40 degrees. So this situation has a negative effect on production if it happens during sensitive stages for trees, such as the blooming or fruit setting, or even during fruit ripening. What climate aspects might change in the future? It could be a decreasing number of rainy days, and that is already happening in Santiago region, for instance. There are only 32 days of rain during the year, while in the past we had about 40 days of rain. An increasing amount of very hot days with temperatures above 33 degrees, and there is already an increase of around 6% in the frequency of these hot days, increasing intensity of rains. In other words, high amounts of water within a short period of time are increasing. Climate variability, that is, we go from cold periods followed by dry periods, normal days, strong winds, sunny days, cloudy days. In other words, a more unstable climate. We expect more droughts, and actually we are experiencing the worst drought of the century. An increasing of air humidity, noticeable in many regions already. An increase of about 5 to 7% of vapor in the air. An increase in winds, which we can already notice with some instruments. And increasing cloudy days, especially on the coast. During the current season, we expect that in the next few months, that is March and April, temperatures should be, let us say, close to normal or slightly hot. So a warm fall is not expected this year. Temperatures probably after March 15, temperatures will be stable and will behave in a normal way during the rest of the fall. And this is caused by cold waters in the ocean, preventing these big heat waves from happening. That is why this year we haven't had them, apart from some events. We haven't had highly frequent heat waves. Now regarding rain, and that is the columns that we can see on the right side, we expect that February finish as a dry month in the south. As you can see that in brown color. We expect March to be more normal. We might experience some rains during March, at least around the central region and also in the south. And this will make average rainfall to become sort of normal. And in April, we expect a slightly dry situation. That is, a fall will end with a slightly rainfall deficiency. That is, for this fall, the drought has not ended, and this year will remain slightly deficient in rainfalls. Here we can see the temperature behavior. A zero line shows the average. So we will go from rather average temperatures by late fall, or rather early winter, May and June. Temperatures will be slightly above the average, but very slightly. On average around 0.4, 0.3 degrees. So that is a slightly warmer winter. Regarding rainfalls, and that is zero line, we expect rainfalls still having some deficit. That is around May, June and July, with a deficit around 20%. About that. In other words, this year might end up being dry, with a slight deficit of, let us say, around 20%, which is much less than 2019. I would say rather closer to 2020. Different sources show the same. They are very coherent, and this is another global center. The IRI, it's a highly respected center in New York, and that shows that in the central and southern regions of Chile, the forecast tends to be with droughts, and that means this year will not be the year when we can see a change in order to end this drought. This will be just another year of a situation of deficits. This is the temperature forecast, and there are no colors in Chile, neither cold or no hot, and the temperature will be rather normal. What has happened in the last few years, I would say that, is that the anticyclone, which is the center you can see there with an H, this is a high pressure center, has remained steady far south. And this high pressure blocks the passage of these fronts in red color here. These fronts should move up north to the central zone, but they crash against the anticyclone, and that blocks the passage, and they are deviated toward the southern zone. That is why most fronts coming to Chile go directly to the south. This produces our current drought in the central zone. Well, we want to be optimistic, and we expect the anticyclone to weaken by winter, so making it possible for some fronts to bring rain to the central zone. So the deficit that we have for this year is going to be a slight or moderate deficit. So the temperatures of the ocean, highly regulating what happens with the fronts, are forecasted to normalize, I would say, around winter this year. And the probability that the water remains cold is in blue and gray. The neutral possibility is in red, and the probability of warmer water. So probability of hot water, it could be late this year towards October, November, and December. So during most of the winter, probably we will have normal or slightly cold ocean water. That means the rains will not be very much abundant this year. And sea temperature, that today is around minus 0.5 degrees below the average temperature, will turn to be normal by late this year. That will be close or very close to its historic average. This means next year this situation will possibly go back to normal next year, as I said. This year we have had very cold water in equatorial Pacific area, and you can see that huge cold water spot moving from Oceania to America, and it has an arm going directly to the north of Chile. And this is what we call La Niña, cold water. And when this cold water stations there, the anticyclone gets stronger and it blocks the fronts much more intensely. But there is a situation that I consider that is different, and it's this big mass of warm water between Australia and America. So how much is it going to help that? Will it help the fronts to come more loaded with vapor this year? How much harm will the mass of cold water cause? We don't know. Actually, it is an uncertain situation. It's like a battle of titans. Hot water tends to produce stronger fronts with high rains capability, while cold water produces an anticyclone which blocks the passage of fronts. That is why it is reasonable that this year we should expect a rather normal situation in general. There is another phenomenon in Chile, that is the Antarctic Oscillation. When the Antarctic Oscillation is on a positive phase, so the fronts tend to move towards the far southern zone, and that is what happened during the last few months. Most fronts head directly to Patagonia. When this oscillation is in a negative phase, that is below the zero line, the fronts get closer, go up north, they get closer to the southern therefore they are closer to the central zone. And as you can see here, in February, there was a tendency to go to a negative phase. So this gives us some hope that this year Antarctic Oscillation will help us somehow. Well, this year with the rains in January, we have a huge surplus from Temuco northbound. We have a surplus of rains that is going to vanish in time, and a deficit of rains in a dry south. So we have a central zone with a lot of water this year and a dry southern area. We expect that in the next few months this surplus will disappear. This year has been cooler than last year. And here you can see the degree days accumulated. Here the red line shows that this year is below records from last year. This has made the growth to be rather relaxed this year. It was not accelerated, and that is good for plants. So what we call the effectively productive hours, that is to say the amount of hours where the temperature is ideal for maximum growth, this year has been slightly better than last year because we have had a colder summer. Now we have many more hours effectively productive than last year. So it has been cooler. That has helped the trees to have a better performance. Well, that was for Casablanca. In Casablanca and many places we have a counting of how many hours of cold stress there are every day, that is shown in blue, how many hours of heat stress in red color, and how many hours temperature remains within the green range every day of the year. And that is the area we call the more effectively productive hours. Here we can see Casablanca with a very good year, with little heat stress and very little cold stress as well, so the green area is predominant. In La Platina, in the Central Valley, here we can see the same situation. This year is cooler than the last year, and when we can say also the effectively productive hours down here, we can see clearly that they are above last year. So that means the effectively productive hours are shown in greens in this graph. This is for La Platina in Maipo Valley, and here we can see the heat waves. These red lines show the heat strokes that are not so harmful because they are brief. That happens in short periods, but when these are longer than 3 days, it can cause a poor production, that is heat stress. Despite this being a cool year, it is a factor impacting on production, especially in most sensitive species. In San Vicente, the same situation. With a cooler year, effectively productive hours are high above records from last year. Some heat strokes, but they are, let's say, within normal for the Central Valley. That means this should not be a bad year, apart from the rains in January, which caused a big damage in most species. So extreme events are, let's say, becoming common: floods, heat waves, extreme winds, cold waves, and droughts. In the future, we will have to be concerned about regulate the occupation of floodplain areas, whether it is by the population or by agricultural projects. We will have to be much more careful when choosing. We will have to think about drainage works, runoff containment works, because floods will be more frequent. In order to face heat waves, we will have to increase the amount of trees planted in agricultural areas in order to lower the temperature. Trees help greatly in that aspect. The use of physical screens or nets to create a more beneficial microclimate, use of artificial or natural shading. We could use trees for this. And in the future, many species like blueberries might benefit from the presence of other trees planted in between to provide shade during part of the day. Evaporative cooling, that is, wetting and letting the water evaporate during the hottest hours. Now, regarding droughts, we have many things to do. Irrigation, modernization, water accumulation, works both inside and outside the fields. We will need to improve the structure of water regulation. Now, for extreme wind, we will need more trees and windbreakers to choose plantation sites more carefully. For cold waves, frost control systems, especially for those late polar frost we are having now, because they have happened lately. And as a conclusion, Clearly, we will be facing a warmer climate in the future, in the next decades, around 1.3 degrees higher, and that could be from here to 2050, with a climate that is going to be more arid, with 20% less rain in the central zone. Some of the secondary changes, that is going to be intensification of winds. Hail is also becoming more frequent in Chile. Cloud patterns will also change. Heat waves and late polar frost. But there will be positive and negative consequences for the production of fruits and vegetables. Many regions in Chile, if not in all of them, will face not only bad effects but also positive ones. The coast, for example, might gain more potential because the temperature in the coast will not rise excessively due to the ocean regulation of temperature. So agricultural activities do not need to move to the south. Many times it will be enough to move closer to the ocean so that the temperature is better regulated. Technology implementation will be essential to keep agriculture competitiveness and to improve it if we do our job correctly, if we think on what we must do and design a consistent strategy according to the threat that climate change is. We will succeed when facing this threat. Thank you.